In today's video, we're looking at how you can create your very own shounen manga or comic. So let's take a look together at how you can create your very own shounen manga. So first of all, what is shounen? Shounen is one of the most popular categories of manga. Shounen refers to a demographic of manga, specifically manga written for a teenage male audience, and usually it focuses on stories with teenage characters determined to achieve their dreams with the help of their friends along the way. So let's take a little bit more of a look at Shounen Art Style. The art style is one of the highlights of shounen manga. The art style can vary from series to series, but usually it features standout, very appealing and unique character designs, bold line art, and the use of various camera angles. By camera angles, I mean various angles that are used to really highlight the movement of the characters in the scene. As you can see in the example that I drew earlier, you can see that using a far perspective angle on the character really makes it appear that someone is watching the character. And then you can show the character from the side to show more movement. Showing the character from above and the character looking up might make the character look a bit more vulnerable. And then a camera angle looking down and looking up towards the character might make the character look more powerful because it makes the character look larger. So understand how to use camera angles because this is one of the key elements to creating a good shounen manga. And then of course, motion lines and showing the motion of the characters is also really important. So let's discuss some shounen themes that you may see in some shounen manga. And while these themes may not appear in every shounen manga you see, they are common features that you may notice from some of your favorite shounen anime or manga. So the first main theme that you may see is that the protagonist is searching for a person or a mysterious object and goes on a journey with their friends to find it. In this instance, the journey is the main component of the story. So while they are searching for this person or mysterious object, the highlight and the main thing that you want to focus on is the journey that the character takes to get there and all of the interesting things they experience on that journey. And then a second major shounen theme that you may see is that at the beginning of the story, the protagonist struggles to fit in and feel accepted. However, they are suddenly put into a challenging situation where they need to either work with someone they previously would not have gotten along with or find a way to survive in a new world. Either way, they find a new sense of belonging within this new group of characters or in this new world. Now keep in mind that themes sort of describes the feeling or the message that you're trying to provide through your story. And of course, these themes can change depending on the genre you choose and the style of story you're telling. However, these themes tend to be quite common across many shounen anime or manga, so I recommend checking out your favorite shounen anime or manga and considering how they may present these types of themes or other themes in those stories. Now let's talk about the first stage of creating a really good shounen manga, brainstorming. How do you brainstorm and what is brainstorming? Brainstorming is the process of getting really inspired by lots of different ideas and then putting those ideas onto paper so you can have a better idea of what ideas you want to work with. So let's take a look at a basic brainstorming process to help you get started. The first thing you want to consider is you want to watch your favorite shounen anime or manga and think about if there are specific genres that really stand out to you the most. Whether it might be science fiction or fantasy, paying attention to the genres you like can help you to better understand how you want to present those genres in your story. And then of course you also want to pay attention to themes like we mentioned earlier. There might be specific themes that they show or ways of showing those themes, and you can think about how to incorporate those kinds of meanings in your story too. And then of course you also want to pay attention to the style. Pay attention to the art style and what elements you like about these art styles. You can then think about, well, I like how the line art is drawn in this shounen manga, and I like how the eyes are drawn in this shounen manga. Pay attention to these little key features and then think about how you might be able to incorporate the features you really like in other series and put it together in a way that you can learn from and you can tell through your story. Basically at this stage you just want to get a better idea of what kind of shounen manga you want to create, because while shounen is the demographic, it can apply to a wide variety of genres, and so it's very helpful to research a variety of different shounen anime and manga and then think about how you might apply those ideas to create new ideas for your own shounen manga or comic. So once you have a better idea of what kind of shounen manga you want to create, it's time to create your main characters. When creating your main characters, remember to include your protagonist, antagonist, deuteragonist or multiple deuteragonists, these are the secondary main characters, any friends or rivals, love interests and mentor characters too. So when you're developing your characters, there is an easier way to make this process more simpler. It's important to start with a sketch, start simple and then work your way up, building more details along the way. It's also very helpful to understand how to use the color wheel, especially when it comes to shonen character design. Complementary colors on opposite sides of the color wheel can create a really bold effect. You will notice that in many shonen manga or anime, most of the main characters will usually have complementary colors in their design. And then monochromatic colors are colors in the same hue, so different shades like red and then pink for example. And this can create a softer, more aesthetic look in the character's design. You will typically notice this kind of color scheme more in shoujo animes. Triadic color schemes, which are in the thirds on the color wheel, can also create a really bold effect. So this might be red, yellow, and blue, for example, the primary colors. And so, by understanding how to use the triadic color scheme, you can also create a really bold look in your characters. You will commonly notice that in shonen anime with 3 main characters, they will usually be in a triadic color scheme. The key to a good character design is to blend the functionality with the character design. You want to ensure that you create a character design that makes sense, but also really looks interesting. So really take some time to consider the shonen character's world that they live in and how you can create a design that really makes sense for this character to have. What you want to aim for is you want to ensure that by just looking at your character, you can really see and understand this character's personality and who they are. This is one of the key factors to creating a good shonen character design. And also, if you want to check to make sure that your character's design stands out, I recommend turning your character into a silhouette form. In this way, you can sort of see if you can identify your character in a silhouette, and if you cannot, it may be helpful to add more features to their design to help them to stand out more. The next thing you want to do is to plan your story. Once you have some ideas and your main characters prepared, it's now time to plan your story. Most shonen manga or anime is planned using the Kishotenketsu style, which we will mention next. The Kishotenketsu style is a common writing structure used in many Japanese literature. It consists of ki, the introduction, where you introduce the characters and the setting of the world. In this part, you may also introduce the main goals of the story. Sho is development. The development is the journey that your character takes to achieve their goals. And then you have ten, which is twist. Later on in the story, you may have a twist or a surprising event that really turns the main events of the story around. This event should surprise the audience. And then you have ketsu, which is the resolution. This is when you tie up all of the points of the story and come to a satisfying ending. So this is the Kishotenketsu style, and if you want a better example of how this style works, I recommend checking out Yonkoma manga, which is 4-panel manga, and this always uses the Kishotenketsu style, so this can help you to get a much better idea of how this style works in action. Now, if you want a different writing structure, you could also use an English novel writing structure, and this is commonly used in Western writing styles, although I have adapted it a little bit to suit my own writing style. This is the writing style I tend to use the most, but you can choose whichever writing style you want to use for your shonen manga. The English novel structure includes the beginning, which is where you introduce the main characters and the setting, the inciting incident, which is an event that happens that really sparks the main character's goals. Usually it's a difficult or challenging event that really sets the rest of the events in the story into motion. Then you have the rising action, which is the way your character works towards fulfilling these goals. In the climax of the story, this is the main point of the story that all the other points of the story have been leading to. This could be a twist, like in the Kishotenketsu style, but this could also be a really significant event, like a boss battle, for example. And then in the falling action, this is where you begin to tie up all the points of the story, working towards the resolution. And then the resolution is the final part of the story, where all the plot points have been tied together and the story is finished. So I recommend choosing the writing style you would prefer to use for your shonen manga. So let's talk about planning chapters and arcs. Arcs are a common feature that you may see in a lot of shonen anime or manga. However, you may not necessarily need it for yours. It just depends on how long you want your shonen manga to be. The longer the series, the more arcs you may include. Arcs are like smaller stories within the main story, and they are a way of sort of separating a longer plot. When you see characters in a shonen anime going through a training or a tournament arc, this is usually an arc in the story. It's also important to keep in mind that arcs don't follow chapters or volumes. They can be as long or as short as they need to be, and they can span across multiple chapters or multiple volumes. Now, as well as this, it's also important to consider the chapters in your manga. Now, this also depends on exactly how you plan on releasing your shonen manga or comic. If you plan on this being a web manga or a web comic, then this will not apply as much, but this is helpful to keep in mind if you plan on self-publishing your manga later on. Keep in mind that manga typically has 8 to 12 chapters per book with around 20 to 30 pages per chapter. So usually when you might be planning on releasing your manga online, keeping in mind that it usually has around 20 to 30 pages can be helpful. And this is also the case when creating a one-shot manga also. One-shot manga will typically have up to 30 pages. The next thing you want to do is you want to write a script. Once you have your basic ideas and notes for your story, it's time to break this down into a script. Typically, most manga script will either be for the entire volume or per chapter, so you can choose whichever script writing method you would prefer. Having a script is really helpful when it comes to storyboarding your manga. Let's look at a few different script writing techniques so you can choose the script writing technique that works best for you. So script writing example 1 is the one that I commonly use the most. And this script writing method is that you write the character's name, you write their dialogue, and then you write any of their actions before or after the dialogue. I find that this method is most helpful for me, even though it's not the most professional technique. And the reason is it can be a lot easier for me to follow this when it comes to storyboarding later on. Now, one of the most common methods for comic and manga script writing is describing what occurs in each panel. So in this script writing method, you write the page and you write how many panels are included on the page, and then you write what happens in each panel, including any dialogue or characters within the panel. I personally find this method a little bit confusing as an artist because I prefer to change around the storyboards when I create it, and I feel like having the panels sort of limits me when I am doing this. However, this is the most common method for comic or manga script writing, so it's completely up to you whether you want to do it for your manga or comic. And then of course in script writing example 3, this is more of a professional screenplay type of script writing method. It's probably a bit too overcomplicated for common manga or comic scripts, but I felt like I should include it anyway. If you need any more advice on how to follow each of these script writing techniques, you can check out my script writing video in the card right here. So now that you have created your script, it's now time to create a storyboard. I recommend either creating a storyboard for your whole volume or per chapter. Most professional mangaka will create a storyboard per chapter and then review the storyboard before moving forward and finalizing the artwork. So when you're creating a storyboard, feel free to change the panel layout, the character and dialogue placement as much as you need in order to find the best page layout to describe that particular scene. This is the part where it's much easier to make changes, but it's a lot harder to make those changes later on with the finalized pages. So take as much time as you need to read through your storyboard and approve your pages before moving on to the next step. Because the next step is finalizing the pages. Once you've read your storyboard and made any necessary changes, it is time to finalize the artwork. You can choose to ink your shonen manga digitally or traditionally, and we'll be talking about how to do both. If you're doing this digitally, the first thing you want to do is set the canvas size. I set my canvas size to 5 inches by 7.5 inches to be like a standard manga size with a resolution of 300. Now, if you're doing this on paper, please keep in mind that most professional mangaka use B4 deleter comic paper. Now, if you're just a beginner manga creator, I don't expect you to have this. It can be a little bit expensive to get. So instead, you can follow this tutorial with A4 or A5 paper. And I do have a page layout template for A4 paper panel sizes available on my website. The link is in the description box down below. So the first thing you want to do is you want to ink your manga panels. Digitally, use a straight line tool and ink in the borders in a slightly larger size than you would for the rest of the inking. And do the same traditionally. Use a slightly thicker black pen in order to ink the borders of your manga panels. And the next thing you want to do is create your sketch. Follow along with the storyboard you created earlier and draw your sketch in as much detail as you need in order to help you do the inking stage next. If you're drawing this traditionally, make sure to keep your sketch light so you can more easily erase the sketch later on. In your digital software or traditionally, finalize the line art for your characters and include the characters and the line art for any speech bubbles and dialogue also. If you're doing this traditionally, I recommend using an inking pen with a nib size of about 0.2 to 0.5 millimeters. So next you want to add the manga screen tones. If you're doing this digitally, many manga software may include manga screen tones along with the program. However, if it doesn't, you may be able to download a manga screen tone texture, or you may be able to create your own. So if you're following this tutorial traditionally, screen tones can be a bit expensive, so you can still follow this tutorial by using grey pens and pencils in order to add shading to your work. You could also use cross-hatching techniques that we're going to be mentioning in the next step. Manga cross-hatching is a technique that I like to use to add a little bit more texture to my manga pages. Cross-hatching is a technique where you draw little lines in a certain direction or lines crossed over each other, and you can see that I use some of these cross-hatching techniques in the character's hair and on their clothing. This can really help to add a little bit more texture and shading, especially if you are doing this traditionally. And then you want to add the final details to finalize the page. So for this example, I added a bit more shading on the character's face, I added some white effects for the character's magical abilities that they're using, and I also added some white highlights in the character's eyes and in the hair. So doing this traditionally, you may want to add additional texture with pens and pencils, or you may want to add highlights with a white inking pen. So now that you have completed your Shounen Manga chapter, it's now time to publish it. You may wish to enter a manga competition or upload it as a web manga. Or you may wish to keep creating for fun while you hone your creative skills. So that is how you can create your very own Shounen manga or comic. I really hope you enjoyed today's video and it helped you to bring your stories to life. Please share your thoughts about what kind of Shounen manga you're creating in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'm sure other people would love to hear your thoughts too. If you enjoyed this video, please consider checking out my graphic novel Having Faith, available in libraries, bookstores, and on Webtoons. Sometimes imaginary friends don't want to be imaginary. Having Faith is a psychological thriller graphic novel created by me, Midnight Cross, which focuses on what it means to grow up, make friends, and fall in love, all while trying to overcome the fears we create in our own minds. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!